So, hello and welcome to this rather rearranged, hastily rearranged live that I'm going to be doing. As you will probably have noticed, I had been hoping to do this particular live over on our other channel, the new Lexical Lab Tutor Development channel. For some reason it's telling me I'm ineligible over there. I'm guessing you need to have a certain number of followers or something. So despite the best laid plans of mice and men, we're back over here. Doesn't seem to have stopped people joining, so thank you very much for finding us here. Today I'm going to be talking to quite a special guest called, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Meri, I think. I've just seen she's there, so I'm hoping that she can ask to join and we can get her on. So yeah, if you're watching, Meri, just I think you have to ask to join and then I can add you and then we can take it from there. For everyone watching, we're going to be talking a bit more about something I've talked about before with a couple of other guests, about the kind of curse of native speakerism that still exists in language teaching and what we can do about it. 1 second. Let's see. Doing these things on a Sunday evening. Hey, that did work.
Yes, it did.
Hey, hello. Sorry for all the mad changing around, and
No
I don't know,
problem.
I don't know how it works with Instagram. I guess you need to have a certain number of followers or something.
Yeah, I have no idea either. I'm not big on lives, but here we are. So as
Hey,
long as people are finding us, that's perfect.
I think people are here. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Meri?
Yes, it's Meri. It's Meri. It was just a mistake in translation from Armenian to English when it was spelled M-E-R-I, but you pronounce it Meri just regularly.
It's an Armenian name originally.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
surname as well, because I was too scared to try and pronounce your surname. So
Meroutian. Yes,
Meroutian.
it's an Armenian.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
Some people say Meroutian, but I sound very Martian that way.
yeah, it's not what you want.
No.
So thank you for finding the time to join us and for doing a rare live. So can you just begin by just telling us a bit about yourself, about your background, about where you're from, how you got into English, how you got into teaching?
Yeah.
All that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it as short as possible because my family moved a lot when I was little. So when I was 6 years old, my family, who was entirely Armenian, left Armenia, and I lived in Yerevan, Moscow, Buenos Aires, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, San Diego, Rome, Lecce, and now Parma.
Oh
All
my
this
God.
was like, yeah, in the first 19 years of my
Oh my
life.
God.
So
Was
yeah, when I
was
went,
that your parents' work or
yeah,
something that was taking them
you're right.
around? Yeah.
Exactly. And so we try to we settled down in Italy when I was about 13, but at that stage I had already like learned 3 languages. I was learning Italian, and I never thought of it as oh, this is going to give me a skill to become a teacher one day or speak English. I learned English in Malaysia. And I always say I always stayed in English speaking countries for just the first, well, not the first, even 4 years on and off through my entire
So
life, but I've always spoken in English.
what else did you learn? Like what was the language at home?
It was a mixture. It was Armenian for the most part, but then my sister is also an English language teacher now, but she's 6 years older than me, and we would communicate in English with each
Okay.
other. Yeah, so it
And
was a
then
bit of a
what else did
mixture.
you learn on top of the Armenian?
Italian.
Okay.
And so and Russian was there too, so I'm not a purist. I can't speak Armenian and keep the discourse flowing in Armenian, and so since I was a child I started like mixing languages and translanguaging, as we would call it today.
Yeah.
But yeah, it came naturally to me. So I was a bit, when I entered the profession, I didn't know anything about native speakers and ideology. I was like, yeah, I'm plurilingual, I speak many languages, and let's get into it. And then I sought my formal training. But when I got into the occupation, and this is a highlight moment and an aha moment for me, I didn't first of all realize that I was being picked because I was sounding like a native speaker, so as to speak, this ideology, right? There isn't something like that. if you think about it, there is no such thing as sounding native, because native speakers amongst themselves have different accents as well.
Totally.
So it's only
Totally.
a matter of perception, right? But I didn't know anything at that time. So I got a call. I had an ad, an online ad, where I was just tutoring some kids, nothing major. It wasn't my life career or life choice, you know. And I got called by a company who said, you know, a language school, which was also a company, and saying, you know, you sound the part. Would you like to come and work for a, you know, as English language teacher? And so I received that benefit. I received the privilege, and I said, yeah, sure. I was I was doing a job as a shop assistant at the time, and I was like trying to make ends meet, finishing university. I was 23, and I hopped.
You were in Lecce at this point,
No,
yeah, in Italy.
I was in Parma. I
Okay,
was
sorry.
studying university. Yeah, I know it's hard to like.
I couldn't keep up with the whole description already. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to keep it condensed, but yeah, no, it was in Parma. I completed my university as I was teaching, and yeah, I then sought formal training almost immediately. I love the profession. I thought, wow, this is great. I just don't know anything about teaching, and it's just terrible. I can't keep saying, you know, I was literally studying the books before the lessons.
Yeah, you and me both.
Mm.
For like the first year.
Yeah, and so I did, you know, the CELTA very quickly, and then afterwards I really loved that, and I thought, oh, I need more experience to then go and get into the Delta. We observed Delta teachers. I did it all in Spain, by the way, just to confuse you even more. I did it in Seville, and I had lovely tutors, and I thought, oh God, I really love this. And still, I have to say, even during that time, even during the Delta, and this never came to me like, oh, there's an issue with native speaker and non-native speaker. It didn't arise. And I thought that, you know, I was looking for, you know, becoming an experienced teacher and mastering all the skills I could to be like this powerful guru of the English language and know everything. And then I came back to Parma after the last module of the Delta, and I went to a school called me from Rome, which then sent me to the Parma University, saying that, oh, you can cover some classes for IELTS. We can't believe we found a Delta qualified teacher there. And I'm like, yes, all the stars have aligned. I now have this great expertise, and I'm going to go there, and, you know, they're going to love me and think, oh my God, how did we ever, you know, miss this? And the person just looked at me. I said, buongiorno, come sta? Sono qui per il colloquio. And she was like, oh, there must be a mistake here. I said, what do you mean? You know, I tried to switch into English. She said, no, we like to have international candidates. I'm like, what does that even mean? I was the most international thing I knew.
I was going to say, you sound pretty international to me.
No, but she was like, oh, you completed your studies in Italy, so I'm afraid you don't qualify to. I'm like, the person was happy to have found me. I'm here just so that you could show me the books and send me to class. And she was not having it. She literally kicked me out. She was like, bye-bye.
Wow.
And that's when I said, oh, not only am I just going to shout it from the rooftops that I'm a non-native speaker, I'm going to call myself that, and I'm going to sell courses and you know, sell myself as a non-native speaking teacher. And I don't care what the world thinks, because I was so I had, and still do, I feel a lot of rage and passion for this topic, because I don't think it's fair on any level. And it took me a long time to come to the realization of this.
Yeah.
And I hope no one ever has to go through that to then realize, oh, it's not about holding XYZ type of certificate. It's all about, you know, what people perceive you to be, and if you belong, or you can own the languages that you speak. So
the crazy thing is, from the sound of your upbringing, you've lived all over the world, and you've obviously communicated all over the world with all kinds of different people, and you've developed language skills as a result of that, and you're obviously a very competent language learner, much more so than a lot of native speakers I know.
Yeah, I hate actually to compare, you know, because I don't think that that's the case. Like, for some people, they might have a native speaker teacher and get along fine and learn a lot, and it's not about that, you know. People think, oh, I'm like against all native. I'm not. I'm against the tendency of advertising one's skill through that, which is a lie, which is a false myth, and saying, you know, sound like me. And what bothers me more is that non-native teachers are doing it probably more frequently than native speakers. And that
In
just,
what way?
in what way? That they sell the fact that they have learned to speak in a native-like accent, which no one understands what they are referring to.
Yeah.
And students having heard that for such a long time, then they go to language schools and, you know, proper, more formal settings,
Yeah.
and ask you if you're a native speaker.
It's interesting you say that, because I think actually, I mean, I guess it's a bit like people internalize racism or internalize the patriarchy or whatever. People internalize native speakerism, and a lot of people that would be kind of framed as being non-native speaker teachers are brutal to each other.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, they'll kind of make comments to me if I'm in places, kind of going, "Oh, did you hear her accent? What kind of teacher must she be?"
Yeah.
And it's like, I've no idea what kind of teacher she is, because I haven't seen her teach. It's like, how do I, you want me to make a judgment about her teaching based on her accent? Seriously.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's also this kind of weird fetishization of, you know, all those kind of accent coaches who, you know, hello, I speak with a British accent.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, is that what they told you? Because, like, no offense, but I've never met a British person who speaks like this.
No,
And, you
no.
know, I don't care either way, but it's a weird way to sell yourself as having spent a lot of time obsessing about sounding like the Queen or something.
Definitely. But it's also, you know, I get where it comes from, because anything I look at, whatever platform I join,
Yeah.
it's the main thing that it's, you know, being put forward. So obviously, if I want to create an ad and I haven't been informed, and like it took me years, right? I'm not trying to justify, but still I'm trying to comprehend where this comes from, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to now write an ad myself. What do ads normally say? Oh, I'm a native speaker.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts. And I think that professionally speaking, those who know, and you lose face when you do that, in terms of, so I don't know if it's a good way to kind of think strategically about your content, but when you do that, yes, you're speaking to thousands and millions of learners, but you're also losing face in terms of professionalism,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's never ever at any point in my career occurred to me to advertise my competence as a teacher on the basis of my passport. You know, it just it doesn't seem to have anything to do with my
I have a
ability
challenging
to
question
teach.
for you. What
Tell
if you
me.
couldn't find, what if you couldn't find a job,
Yeah.
and you knew that everyone around you was seeking out the nativeness in you? Would you then not say where you were from? Because I have a close friend and colleague who admittedly, like she admitted, I said, you know, because I have an Italian surname, because she married an Italian, I took his surname, never thinking about, ooh, people will not. But she was like, that's the first thing I have on my CV, she told me. And she's a dear friend. She knows everything. She knows what I stand for. And she still says, I'm keeping it there. People
I
say
guess.
I'm very, you know, I'm not accepting of this, but see, I am. I have friends who are, and I try to have these conversations with them in an attempt to bring as much awareness, so that they would stop doing that. But let me tell you this, it's very hard to totally understand the situation, because the privilege, if you hold that privilege for a long, long time, it kind of becomes part of you. You actually, a bit like with non-native speakers
Yeah.
who feel the imposter syndrome, the native speakers actually feel that they're better in some
Yeah.
sort of.
Oh, I mean, I see it all the time in online flame wars and discussions with people, and I mean, we'll come to it
So
in a
answer
minute. But what
my
was
question, please.
so two things. I think one thing that's interesting about the native speakers believing their own hype is it often aligns with a certain kind of politics, in my experience. And if they're British, they're usually Brexit voters, and if they're American, they're usually Trumpers. And there's something particular about those kinds of native
You are
speakers.
profiling native speakers.
I just, you know, speaking from experience, speaking from bitter experience of watching these people and arguing with them online, there's definitely and you know that those kind of politics are based on a sense of privilege and grievance and victimhood, and the idea that you're the real victim even though you know you're in the majority or whatever. In terms of myself, to answer your question, um I would never advertise myself as a native speaker. If someone actually asks me where I'm from, I just tell them where I'm from. I wouldn't try to hide it to make a point, but you know, it's funny because inside England itself, it's not always a massive selling point if you're from London and you sound like a Londoner. You know, there are people in Cambridge and Oxford who regard you as a somewhat, you know, inferior language teacher because you have a particular regional
Yeah.
accent and so on. And so I became quite aware of that quite early on myself, where I felt like I didn't have the accent that was being fetishized by the course books I was using in the 90s, where you're doing pronunciation exercises. And I'm like, I don't actually say those words like that myself. You know, it's like, is there something wrong with me or is there something wrong with the model?
Mm.
And I understand the kind of the weirdness of that feeling. And I think to begin with, when I started teaching, like when I went to university, I probably tried to modify my own accent a little bit and tried to, you know, not sound as common as maybe I might otherwise have done,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, I think you just become more secure in yourself and more just kind of, do you know what? If people don't like it, why do I want to work with these people anyway? It's not my problem.
Yeah.
Which I guess
It becomes
is
a
very
problem
much
when,
where you got to quite quickly.
yeah. Yeah. It's just a problem of, not then. I have been called many times also online. They've seen something or there's an ad or something and they call me and they say, we just like to know, I know I shouldn't be asking this, but what nationality are you? Because our students don't want Italians. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not Italian, but this is discriminatory and I will not be working with you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
And if more people did that, if they were
Yeah.
a bit honest and had a bit of integrity.
It's easy
um
to do as well. And I mean, I've done it myself. I've refused to go to conferences where I know the schools are only employing native speakers.
mm,
I get emails from people saying, can you help me find a native speaker teacher for my school, that kind of thing. And it's like, can help you find a teacher. You know, I can't help you find, I can't like assess them on the basis of their passports. But if you're looking for a good teacher, I can recommend some people, you know. So yeah, I hear you. I think it's easy just to say no to people.
yeah, it's everywhere, and sometimes you just have to raise your hand and say, even though I don't like that the extra attention. But when my son, who was 3 at the time and had to join a nursery, they had an English program and we were having like a parents meeting. Sitting there minding my own business, and the guy said, "He's a wonderful teacher, by the way. He's in Italian. Obviously, everything was in Italian. It's an Italian school." So he said, English is supposed to start, but we're having a hard time. But don't worry about it. The children won't be exposed to our terrible accents. There will be native speaker teachers coming in to talk and to have a thing like that." And I was like, I much rather someone who is a qualified teacher as you
Yeah,
are to teach them English with your accent.
yeah,
I'm sure you know the colors. And
yeah,
I'm sure you know like the basics
yeah,
or elephant names or whatever.
yeah.
So fast forward, that never came to be. Like there was some problem. Probably they couldn't find a native speaker. I mean, how can you not find an English teacher? Like the world is full of English language teachers. But they were like, we can't find it, we can't activate it, and they were apologetic. I'm like, look, everything is fine. They were using my kids sometimes to carry with the lesson. His accent, never mind. Like, let's just not even go into like children's accents. How absurd is all this? um but then I said, I think that, I don't know if anyone, if it sparked curiosity in some of the parents, but I said, that I'm an English language teacher and I'm not native, and I sound just perfect and I'm intelligible. And I said, sometimes, I said, sometimes the schools that kind of send people over don't verify, and then they don't check who these people
Yeah,
are. I said, I'm
yeah,
just saying, as a concerned parent.
yeah. Well, there's been case after case after case of like, you know, child sex abusers and offenders ending up in Thailand working as native speaker teachers in international schools and stuff like that, and they haven't
Yeah,
been
it
vetted and they
doesn't have
haven't
to
been
be as extreme,
that
right, you? But still,
that those stories are out
like,
there, you know.
yeah, but you still, you know, you don't, you just, because they're hiding behind a school, a language school, it doesn't make them teachers. Like, you can try to embellish it as much as you want. But I think more, this is something that we could look at with a lot of stakeholders, right? Saying, okay, do you actually verify that the person in front of you is a teacher? Can you ask? Because no privacy. We can't be. I would like to know. You know, you have everything. You basically, all the ads on the media are directed to me. Where's my privacy in anything? Where is it? But when it comes to knowing if in fact the person you're paying for, the skilled professional, is in fact a professional, oh, you're invading privacy. So, you know what I
Yeah, it's
mean?
madness.
It is.
So, for the people out there who maybe aren't as familiar with the kind of jargon, how would you define what native speakerism is, and why it's a bad thing?
Yeah. Well, it's an ideology that has been perpetuated for decades, because of, you know, colonialism, imperialism, right? We went into, today I did a whole session on methodologies and the history of it all. You know, we went from direct methods, you know, direct translation methods and everything until today. And what it does is native speakerism privileges and favors Western institutions or certain sounding elite class, anything that is attributed, that can be attributed to this ideology of being superior. And in turn, it looks at anyone who does not have certain aspects. We can't even define them specifically because it could be what you look like, it can
Yeah,
be what you sound like, it
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah,
be, you know, it can have so many different faces that it just doesn't stop at one thing.
yeah,
And you can be in or out, like one day you're in and the next day you're out, depending on where you are, where
yeah,
you're
yeah,
geographically located. Some people told me, you know, if you have fairer skin, people
yeah,
see closer to the, someone
yeah.
says if I have the British, you know, RP, then I'm closer to. And strangely, in a very sick way, people have tried to conform to this, you know, to fit the mold
Yeah.
that native speakerism has become, and they're not seeing, you know, the issue with wanting to conform to this ideology,
It's
which is just that, it's the perception of others of you.
it's funny
And
that
so,
you said. Sorry, go on, Mary. Go on.
no, I was thinking that, you know, if you think about inclusivity and identity, which is like, they're the trending most topics
Yeah,
right now, anywhere you look, right?
yeah,
We're
yeah,
changing course books, we're accommodating, but we haven't, you know, defeated this little thing, the elephant in there. We haven't addressed it properly
yeah.
because I've heard of textbooks being very inclusive. I've heard of, but the teachers are not included in this. And so we're having native speakers coming from sometimes monolingual backgrounds
Yeah.
who expect their multilingual global classrooms to look like the classrooms we had 100
Yeah.
years ago. And they're complaining that their students come from a multitude of backgrounds.
Welcome to the world, kid. Yeah. It's interesting what you said about the way in which what defines you isn't fixed and it kind of varies depending on the context, because I think it very much relates to like the race laws, where if you had like the United States or South Africa, they suddenly would change the race law and they would say rather than one grandparent being black, it could be like if your great grandparent was black. So it'd be like rather than being 1/4 black, if you were 1/8 black, you were then racialized as black. Okay. And overnight, people had spent their whole lives basically kind of going, I'm white, I'm okay, I'm white. So, oh shit, now I'm black. And it just changes overnight. And I have a friend who's originally from Prague, from Czechia, and he's called Yuri Kasper. And he was looking for jobs in China for years. He was living in London. Amazing, amazing teacher, Celta, Delta, PhD, super bright guy, spoke incredible English, kept getting kicked back. And eventually he'd lived in the UK long enough and Brexit happened and he did the British citizenship test and he became a British citizen, and almost overnight he started getting offered jobs, and he was like, seriously, like now I'm a native speaker because I've done this bloody citizenship test. And it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
now they're scared that maybe if they reject you, you know, they don't know, like you could be third generation Anglo-Czech or something, you know. And it's that kind of level of madness. It's like you do a
It's a level
test.
of madness when it sounds like the teacher is showing you their pedigree in order to get the job. It's people saying on social media, on Facebook groups, that their moms or their great grandparents, were born in the UK. It's teachers saying, "I've had experience. I live in London," to sell their
Yeah,
services. And it's madness to a degree where you can't educate anyone on anything anymore. It's madness where parents who have no background in education or in language learning and in second language acquisition tell you what you should be doing and what you should be not doing, and it's insane. I've come to a level where, with every post or thing there's always someone there, and you say, yeah, just ignore their, either their bots or their whatever or their whatever. Like, even if it was a made up message by someone who is totally, but it is something that someone might actually think,
yeah,
right? So like, I take every opportunity I get to, answer
yeah.
this.
It's
And I don't think
draining though.
I'm
Yeah,
wasting my time. I don't think I'm wasting my time. I think it's necessary because no one is out there doing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
few
yeah, yeah.
people are. And then you know what happens? Like, you kind of get so discouraged by it all. And I always say it's because not enough of us are doing this.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, we'll come to it later, the kind of the call to action and what people out there can do, because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know how draining it can be and how kind of disheartening it can feel like things are, where you feel like you're just fighting a whole load of brainwashed people who don't want to listen to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, I'm sure from these kind of online arguments you've got into, you're well aware of the arguments that people put forward in order to defend the employment of native speakers and the kind of continued hierarchy and sort of fetishization of native speakers. So, I'm just going to throw some of these things that I know people say about, no, it's better to have native speakers because, and you can answer them however you feel like, okay?
Sure.
So one of the most popular claims is natives know the language better.
To this, I'd answer, if you are a native speaker or live in a context where English is spoken around you, does everyone speak it in the same way? If we were to give an essay, like, okay, write about today's modern technology and how it influences people's lives, or how it has influenced or young people, anything, would I get the same response? And will these two native speakers have performed in the same way? Do a speaking test, do it in a different way. Let's look at another aspect of this, right? It's clear to say, I don't think it's hard to understand that any two people who are different from one another, given a same task, will not perform identically, right? And wherever you are, whichever place, someone who is extremely smart and someone you look up to, you have great respect for, and you have the village idiot, so to speak. And they can both be categorized as both are Italian, or both are
Yeah,
English, or both are any nationality you want.
yeah,
So to say things like a native speaker is better, which native speaker? I can go on board with this, but which? Is this a qualified native? Is it someone who has studied? Is it someone? So I need to know a lot of background information to then realize and actually respond to that. So I would say that just think the most common answer you could possibly give, the most common example, so people can open their minds and think, oh, yeah, it's different. It's totally different.
yeah. I mean, I see it all the time on the Facebook group I run. I've got this thing called English Questions Answered, and teachers and sometimes students just pop up with random questions. And the people who answer are a mix of native and non-native speakers. And the answers are always wildly different. And a lot of the time, the most perceptive and thoughtful and articulate answers are from people in Slovenia or Poland or whatever. And a lot of the time, some of the ones where you have to kind of go, yeah, are often the
Yeah.
natives.
I think you might be biased towards non-native speakers.
I mean, I just recognize competence when I see it, and the reverse. And I think having actually learned the language, I mean, I recognize in myself, it took me a long time to reach an understanding of how language worked and what was important to convey about the language to students. And I think the fact that I'd never learned English myself, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, never consciously learned English myself, was a hindrance in a way, because it took me longer to understand, just things like collocation and fixed expressions and bits of
Okay.
language that went together and genre. And I mean, like every other teacher of any nationality, I'm
But
also still learning all that stuff.
yeah, and let me tell you that I learned about phrasal verbs when I was actually teaching, not when I was a student of English.
Yeah, like just what
And
they're
I was,
called and stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
A
yeah,
student
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
student came in when I was not qualified, didn't know anything, when I was just a native speaker, which I, never that. But a student came in, and I was working I was doing company courses, and we had like an individual session, and I said, "Oh, Mario, what do you want to improve in English? What's what are the struggles that you're having with the language?" And he was like, "Oh, phrasal verbs." And I'm like,
It's the classic Italian answer.
and no, I was like, "Yeah, I know." And I was, "Can you make an example of a phrasal verb?" Again, it's so funny. No, I've never seen like a native speaker admit to this. Like, I didn't know because they don't. I mean, most of the native speakers that I know never learned
Yeah,
this.
I didn't
And
have a clue until I started doing myself.
yeah, until you teach
Yeah,
it as a second language, where people know exactly what
yeah,
it is, what it's not, giving you, oh, it's like switch on the light or turn it
yeah,
on or turn it. I'm like, oh yeah, and then that was for him the example. But for me, like I've worked as an English language teacher at a nursery, and in a primary cycle and in a secondary cycle. And at the nursery and the secondary, I was teaching L1, so English as a first
yeah.
language. It was an international setting, so that was my experience. And within the classroom, especially in the secondary cycle, I had, I was working with 14, 15-year-olds, those who were non-native, and they had, how did I know? It was a very international mixed group. However, some of them were labeled L2 speakers of English. That's another thing that I hate, L1, L2, L3. I hate that distinction of the hierarchy and the chronological order in which you have learned languages, which has to sort of make sense. The more you try to, I think, put language in a box, the more you move further away from what learning languages is really like. Totally. And they were trying to do that. And whenever I had an essay, I had to actually adapt the test to L2 speakers and L1 speakers. And I had all these rubrics and things like that. And my L1 students, they didn't perform well in terms of, like, they did not even know general punctuation rules. And my L2 students would be like, okay, if you hadn't been sitting in front of me, I would totally think this was copied from somewhere. Like, what book did you copy this from? Is this your, production? Is this your work? And there were 4 of these students, and all 4 were the best.
Interesting.
And the L1 students were like, why are we doing grammar here anymore? We are, we don't need to. We are already English speaking, so we don't need to work on. I'm like, have you seen your classmates' work?
Yeah.
I mean, considering that you need to, put out your opinion out there and say something constructive about something you've read, like, it looks like you've written that with your feet. Like, you not even, you're not even thinking about, elevating or, kind of making an improvement in your own language. Because the world around you is telling you that you sound great.